Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Inferno cast. I, of course, am Inferno Fox, part of Inferno Fox Gaming, on this podcast here that, of course, is on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and the like. And we're going to be talking about a very well-loved subject in video gamedom. But before we get into that, I want to go ahead and introduce my very well-esteemed guests and crew. And we have, of course, Jason the 13th, of the YouTube channel, Jason the 13th, where you can get a lot of Tears of the Kingdom, Pokemon, and Fork Knife gameplay. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And up next, of course, we have Simbu Darkfang. He is our designated level 5 grandpa and main actor for Basement of the Dead in Aurora, Illinois. That again is Basement of the Dead in Aurora, Illinois. That's in the Chicagoland area. Simbu, thank you so much for joining us. That is an excellent but terrible Wookiee impersonation. Thank you. Next up, we have Astrimedes, and he is a developer and co-owner of Second Place Games. Astrimedes, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here doing this and procrastinating, doing any game work.
Absolutely. And we're happy to oblige you. And last but not least, we, of course, have Stormrosesky of the YouTube and Twitch channels of Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I will try to contribute as much as I can with me in my cold this evening. So still glad to be here.
Oh, sorry to hear that you're not feeling well, under the weather, but glad that you could join us and hang with us, and hopefully we'll bring some smiles to your face as you deal with your said illness. It sucks to be sick. But before we get into our topic, which is a very general one, which is Pokemon, I want to post a question to my crew, a pre-discussion topic, and this is going to be one that's going to be a little bit strange, and I'm going to hit Astrimedes with this first. Astrimedes, what is your favorite, or what was your favorite Sega Genesis video game?
I did a lot of gaming on the Genesis. It's probably hard to pick just one. An oddly memorable game somehow on the Genesis that seems very much like a Genesis game to me is Eternal Champions. Was a fighting game on the Genesis that I'm not picking it because I love the game. For some reason, when I hear the Genesis, I often am reminded of that weird game Eternal Champions. In terms of one good game that comes to mind was there's a game Landstalker on the Genesis that I think was fairly late in the Genesis's kind of run, and seemed like looked and felt like very good and impressive, like kind of 3/4 down, like isometric view action RPG kind of thing. Very lightly Zelda kind of inspired flavored. You had a kind of elfin-eared hero, sort of like Link, but it was a good game. It had really interesting kind of like crazy jumping puzzles and stuff, and
they just re-released that on the NSO expansion pack last month.
Oh, did they? Gunstar Heroes, actually, as we talk about it more, come to mind. But Gunstar Heroes is another one that I thought was just like a really great, like I returned to it many times, Genesis game.
Nice. Storm, if I could guess, yours was Miss Pac-Man, because I think you did mention that.
Yes, absolutely. I'd have to agree. Miss Pac-Man.
Yeah,
I wish I could play it right now, honestly. But there is a way to play a little bit of it on the PlayStation, so as soon as I could, any system that I've had since being a kid, I would definitely make sure I could play it somehow. So
yeah, and being on the Genesis, it was definitely an excellent version, probably one of the best versions of a Pac-Man game that's not Pac-Man Championship Edition.
Yes, that one was so much fun.
Jason, how about you? What was your favorite Sega Genesis video game?
Yeah, Comic Zone, where you're running through the comic book and fighting.
Nice.
That was my favorite Sega game.
And Simbu?
Well, let's go with NHL 94. It was a great game to play. Comic Zone was a great one too. But I'm going to, for my top 2 all times, I'm going to go with Streets of Rage and Mighty Max.
Yes.
Never played Mighty Max.
Never played Mighty Max. Definitely played a lot of Streets of Rage. Yeah.
Oh, such excellent games. And the reason I'm bringing up the Sega Genesis games is because my video that's coming out on Saturday is my 10 reviews in, a Nintendo fanboy reviewing Sega Genesis games. And I kind of go a little bit in depth on my thoughts and feelings on the Sega Genesis overall, and the general feelings of regret, just hooking my truck trailer to the Nintendo boat, as it were, when there was another excellent system, that of the Sega. So if anybody's interested that's listening, feel free to check that out when it premieres on Saturday at 10 a.m. But today is not just about Sega. No, our main focus, of course, is Dragon Quest. No, it is another classic JRPG series, and that is Pokemon. And I'm going to kind of give the warning that I personally am not the biggest Pokemon guy, so I might be throwing terms around that I may not be as I might not be very effective with.
Me neither. Don't dox us.
I was hoping that Jason would smile at that Pokemon reference that I made too, not being very effective. Anyway, but yeah, please don't dox us. 123 Any Man Street in Chicago, Illinois. But Pokemon is such a big franchise that we all have history with it, even if there is no history, because a lot of times, me personally, I did a lot of active avoidance of it because I'm such a big Nintendo guy, yet Pokemon is so core to the overall DNA of that company. But the first time I personally played a Pokemon game was just last year with the Legends of Arceus video game, which is actually one of the newer and also really, really good games, at least from what I've heard and what my own experience. So just kind of want to gauge everyone else's overall history with the Pokemon franchise. Jason, let's start with you because you've got the biggest history.
Oh yeah. Played all the main generations, of course. Not very many of the side games, a few of the side games, but not very many side games. But yeah, I pretty much own all of the Pokemon main games. I'm missing like one of them. I'm missing a black 2 or a white 2 for my collection. And those are probably one of the harder ones to get.
Yeah, so you heard that here first. If anybody out there is listening has a black 2 or a white 2, this is a 3DS game. Don't just send us black 2 or white 2. Send them to 123 Anywhere Street in Chicago. No, Jason 13th's Pokemon collection is really impressive when you look at it, because it goes all the way back to the Game Boy entries.
The red and blue. Yeah,
red and blue. You also have yellow. Did you ever get green, the Japanese version?
No, I've never gotten green.
So that's going to be your Christmas present. That's a good one for you. Astrimedes, how about you? What kind of a history or experience do you have with Pokemon?
My only hands-on experience with the Pokemon games was on the original Game Boy, the first Pokemon. So this would have been, I remember I was in high school, it would have been the 90s. And I don't actually remember if it was red or blue. But I remember liking it just as a game, being very into kind of like JRPG style combat games and everything at the time. I liked it. I liked the notion of, kind of all the different options that were presented. It was like an RPG game where you had like so many party members for the time, especially to think in those terms. So I liked it as a game. I never really connected with the franchise beyond that, but of course through, just being interested and in games and stuff, have been very adjacent to Pokemon attempt inspired games, reading interesting things about Nintendo shutting down anything that has a whiff of Pokemon about it, that a little too much treading on their IP. So yeah, that's my history with Pokemon.
Oh, excellent. And kind of keep the RPG element and the similar game element in the back of your mind here, because I've got kind of a couple follow-ups on that as we kind of progress here. Simbu, though, what's your overall history and experience with Pokemon?
As far as actual played, I believe I went up through Silver and Gold. I did get Sun and Moon at one point, but that didn't really capture my attention. I enjoyed Pokemon Snap for the N64. That was a pretty fun little game. And then some of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeons. Those are kind of fun. Of course, those are all offshoots of the main branch, but for the most part, that's generally my limited experience with Pokemon.
And honestly, it's a whole heck of a lot more than what I have, because I've just played the 2 games and Smash Brothers. Like that's really it. I'm really impressed with that, Simbu. That's awesome. Storm, how about you? What's your overall experience history with Pokemon?
The first exposure I've ever had with any character of Pokemon was in Smash Brothers with Pikachu. Honestly. Yeah, that would be it. And other than that, I have Pokemon Go, and I've played a little bit of the free game that came out for Pokemon not too long ago on the Switch.
It's the
arena type thingy.
Oh, no, not the Quest.
Stadium.
Oh my God, no, the name is drawing a blank. It's a big one right now too.
Oh no, our Pokemon expert has
I
failed.
know, because I don't play it.
It's not a Pokemon, like a Pokemon Stadium rehash, is it?
No, because it'd be nice to get a brand new Pokemon Stadium, but we only gotten the redone on the what do you call the freebie Nintendo Super Nintendo stuff on the Switch.
Let me see. I don't have it anymore.
Yeah, I can't think
Pokemon
of
Unite.
There you go.
Unite,
That
yes,
was it.
That's it.
That was it. So I have Pokemon Go and Pokemon Unite, and I've only played them on Smash Brothers. So that is my Pokemon extent, other than knowing they're everywhere. There's movies and cartoons, and Tubi has a great selection of Pokemon episodes and all that kind of stuff. So, there you go. So I'm fascinated to learn.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Nope, I'm just fascinated to learn and hear what you have to say, because, I don't have all that much exposure to them. So
I was going to say, any mail directed towards our Pokemon expert claiming he did not catch them all. Jason the 13th at 123 Anywhere Street in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan.
There you go, my friends and fans that are hearing us. You know where to send your mail of love. We don't say the H word here.
We can't say hello.
Oh, we say 5-letter H words, but we don't say the 4-letter one.
Have? Oh.
So one of the things with the overall gameplay loop with Pokemon, the whole monster collection portion, that's been done before by other series and other RPGs, like Dragon Quest V was one of the ones that actually did the whole sort of collect a monster and get him into your main party as like a permanent member. So they've used it before, and it's even being used in more recent entries, such as like the Yokai Watch series, and even like Shin Megami Tensei 5 and the general, I think, Shin Megami Tensei series. But what do you? I kind of want to know your guys' thoughts. Like, what do you think was the secret sauce that made Pokemon really have its success that all the other series didn't have? Like, what was it with Pokemon that allowed it to blow up versus all the previous RPGs that have really done that before. Jason, let me defer to your advanced Pokemon knowledge, because you not only have you are well versed with Pokemon, but obviously you've played a whole number of RPGs, JRPGs before. What do you think it is with Pokemon that's the winning formula?
I don't know about the actual winning formula, but for me, it was because it was on the Game Boy. So I have two brothers. We would fight between as to who gets to play when and whose turn it is, all that stuff. And oh, you took 20 minutes to play, or I got 15 minutes to play. So having my own Game Boy and having my own RPG on the Game Boy, even though it was, yeah, a little kiddish, but it was still an RPG that my brothers could play and argue, and no problem. I could always play my Game Boy on the side while they're playing their turns. So having that little freedom to escape the family stuff is what helped draw me in and got me hooked into it. So I'm thinking maybe that because it came out on the Game Boy instead of a console, that you could take it anywhere to go and it didn't matter, that maybe that helped hook a bunch of people into it.
Astrimedes, how about you? Do you agree with what Jason said? Do you think there was anything else that helped to contribute to that secret sauce for the Pokemon formula of success?
Yeah, I do think Game Boy at the time did have kind of like this interesting exposure advantage as being kind of like the only viable mobile system at the time. So like there may be an element of that, but to me, it just seems like the fact that the characters were very cute, very marketable. The gameplay is simple but deep enough to be interesting to someone who knows and likes RPG tropes, but simple enough also to be picked up by someone with no prior knowledge of even kind of playing a JRPG. So I feel like if you look at like for the time especially, I feel like you look at like the interface, and I think one of the kind of like things that even then, without kind of thinking in these terms, I thought was kind of almost striking about it was like just it felt very simple compared to a lot of games with like your moment to moment like choices, but it presented this broader, and then I can go out catching these guys and have all these different options in combat. So it's like it took and again, like the element of the element matchups, like the rock paper scissors of the different elements, it's sort of the same kind of thing. It doesn't actually present many choices in the moment, but it's like a meta choice you make outside of combat about the way you're kind of gearing yourself up. So it's this nice loop that I think many games probably at the time especially weren't really getting right in a really like attractive package, and some aspects of that are sort of like the Nintendo formula too, right? Like the really cute, well-designed, marketable characters that and then you just wrap it up in a carefully designed game. And yeah, I think that would be my my thoughts in general, just on its aspects of a game that kind of hook people.
And two things that you had mentioned, one being the rock paper scissors aspect is more like rock paper scissors, Lizard Spock, Captain Kirk, Captain Picard, Darth Vader, because there's 18
definitely over
types.
time. Yes,
remember it didn't start with 18,
right?
They added a few along the way.
But man, there were even with Red and Blue, there were still a lot of the elements, and even with having such a simple children's game, having that large level was really honestly for that type of an RPG is really impressive. I'll kind of speak to that a little bit later, but also just a brief mention for all the Game Gear lovers, when Astrimedes says Game Boy was one of the only viable ones. He's right, because the Game Gear ate batteries like crazy, and if you don't remember that, you're not remembering things.
And it took 8 batteries at once.
Yes.
I said viable. Yeah.
Yes, he said viable. He knew what
Game
he
Boy
knew
took
what he
4
said.
batteries.
He said what he said. sorry, all you Game Gear lovers, but yeah, he said what he said. I'm going to stand by it.
It was a
Not
neat system, but it wasn't mobile.
Yes, not knocking the games that were on the Game Gear because they were excellent, but honestly, they would have been better as their whole console counterparts on the Sega Master System. That would have been much better as that, because a lot of them were released in Brazil. I'm going off on a tangent. Let's move on with my further question here, because I'm also really curious, like how you guys feel overall, how the overall impact that Pokemon has been to kids who grew up with the franchise when it first came out. Jason the 13th, you've got some cousins who have kids that you've kind of guided through the Pokemon process when they released, when they were like little kids. How do you feel that's helped them now being older, being in their teens and 20s? What, like, with their like game selection? What do you think about that, Jason?
That's a hard one to say, because if they still play RPGs, you know, that maybe having somebody to sit there and help them through one would get them further in the game, rather than play 10-20 minutes and give up, to where you actually have somebody helping you. So it might have gotten them into the RPGs a little bit more, but I'm not 100% sure how much they're still into RPGs.
And like, it's really interesting because there's obviously been a lot of the youngins that have really grown up with the series, as opposed to us, where we were in like grade school, junior high, high school when Pokemon came out in the fall of '98. Which is crazy to think that, a quick sidebar, it's crazy that the Game Boy had been out for 9 years at that point when Pokemon arrived in the US, like 9 years.
Wow,
And
that is crazy.
at that time, there were 4 Final Fantasy games. There were 2 Mario games. There were 1 Mario spinoff, 1 Metroid. There was 1 Zelda game, and yet it was Pokemon that really helped to really just continue and drive sales. And I could argue made a compelling choice for Nintendo to continue the Game Boy line as the Game Boy Color, when there were plans to come out with a more advanced colorized system, a la the Game Boy Advance. Instead, they decided to continue with the Game Boy Color. So I'm really curious, Simbu, if you don't mind me asking, because you said you played up to Sun and Moon. Did you have a favorite entry in the series up to that point? Was there one that really caught your eye, that was like one of your favorites?
Not really. I would say anything, if anything, I would say Pokemon Snap, probably, because of the ability to be artistic and take different photos and stuff like that, and line up shots. So that was a unique kind of game mechanic. Of course, now a lot of games have photo mode, where you can make your own photos and screensavers and screenshots and whatnot. But for Pokemon Snap, you were graded on your photos that you took. So that was kind of fun. It's like, I get to take this like cool picture, like I think it's cool, and then it's like, oh yeah, it's okay, but it's not that great. I mean, not to gonna lie, it probably helped me a lot with my ability to take good photos.
I was actually just going to ask, like, not I'm aware of Pokemon Snap, like kind of the general premise and everything. When it grades the photos, does it tell you like what would have improved it? Does it like, oh, rule of thirds, or does it do anything like that? Like telling you how to make a better photo? Like you mentioned, maybe improved your photo taking, or was it more of a general just by grading and you could sort of intuit rather than see spelled out?
If I remember correctly, I mean, of course, it's been, quite a few years since I played it.
Of course.
It would give you some feedback, like basic feedback, like already photographed, or, like if you didn't get, like there's two different Pokemon and there's two different, heights in the same photo, and one wasn't fully in frame or, on top, or
I
fully on
see.
frame at bottom. It would be like missing part of,
Yeah,
part
so it
of
was like how well you
subject.
captured the subject with its grading. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, again, it
Tangents,
was
just weird curiosity of mine,
Yeah, right.
how that
Again,
mechanic worked.
yeah, it wasn't like, oh, well, if you would have went, at a 45-degree angle instead of a 42, and would have taken the photo from left to right in a panoramic, roll your computer chair, and maybe looked at it and took the photo bending over backwards upside down.
There's
It's not it doesn't do anything like that.
right.
But,
I was thinking more along the
gives-
lines of it would be neat to see a game that took like real photography rules, and I like but know nothing about like what the rules are for photography. And I could see a game like I'm kind of vaguely aware of this rule of thirds where you want to compose a picture where it's like things are sort of like in thirds with how you choose to frame your subject, whatever. And it would be neat if there was a game, and like there probably is in some fashion, but a game where you're taking pictures trying to grade you on stuff like that, like gives you a bunch of very photogenic vistas or something, and it's like a relaxing game where you're trying to take good photos.
Yeah, and I gotta imagine a Pokemon game probably isn't like that. Although there was a new Pokemon Snap that did release on the Nintendo Switch, I think a couple years ago.
Yep.
But I'm gonna guess, Simbu, that you hadn't picked that one up, or it's
No.
funny. That's not a impossibly thing that I've heard. Generally, Pokemon stuff does sell really well, although that one only sold like 2.94 million copies or 2.79. I just saw a video on that maybe a couple hours ago, just showing the not great sales of that Pokemon offshoot, because a lot of people share Simbu's feeling about that love for Pokemon Snap, but you got to show that love with the dollars and the money if you want more of those. I'm just
Yep.
as a eternally damned Metroid fan, I know that by heart. Jason, though, what is your favorite entry in the overall Pokemon series?
Oh, so trying to remember back, comparing old games to new games kind of is unfair in a lot of ways. Probably the original Red and Blue that got me hooked into everything, but that's more nostalgia, I think, than favorite. Arceus basically took over being the favorite, and for a while I didn't even think myself that it was a main game in the series, but it has been included in the main games, even though it's not its own generation. It is considered part of the main line of games for Pokemon. It's not a offshoot game. But the way they did Arceus was really good, and it's different than the way the main generation games are. As for the main generation games, it's almost a what one's a better story compared to what one's the better gameplay. Because Black and White being what it is, and it's the reason it's over like $150 game is because it is by far one of the best storylines of Pokemon. As for the Pokemon in it, wasn't my favorite, but Sword and Shield, I love the gameplay, but horrible story. It was a horrible story for Sword and Shield.
So it's interesting. My follow-up question would have been which one was done the best, but you kind of answered that, where Black and White had the best story, but gameplay wise was Sword and Shield.
Yep, at least in my opinion.
And it's funny, I would really love to see if they did a Legends series that was because Arceus was a prequel of Diamond
and Pearl. Yep.
If they do a prequel for Black and White,
ooh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I am fully vested in the Legends, the Arceus series here, just because of how great this was.
And it plays a little differently than the rest of the games.
But I am not vested in this. I gave it its try, but let's talk about that. I want to talk about this and kind of get Astrimedes' thought process as a developer, and also Storm's overall thought process on gameplay. Because I want to talk about glitches and issues in the series. Because good God, going from this game, Arceus, which didn't look the greatest when it was being previewed, and the whole poppin' stuff, and it's good, it's a PS3 game, but it ran well and the gameplay loop was great, to this where it looked like it looked like a PS3 game on the trailers, but on gameplay, to me it looked like a PS3, PS2, PSP game, and glitched like crazy, errored like crazy. When I say that, it's a big star, big asterisk, because Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have had a myriad of different experiences where my time with it had been pretty like glitchy, but not crashes. Jason the 13th has been pretty lucky. Jason, I remember you telling me that you didn't have any crashes.
Hey, if you were to watch through all my gameplay for Pokemon Scarlet, there's like 2 little itty bitty minor glitches, and I don't mean the pop in graphics and stuff like that. I mean like minor glitches. I did not get any crazy glitches or any errors whatsoever while playing.
And the Pokemon Company and Game Freak have done I'm giving them too much credit if I call it mediocre. Done a mediocre job of giving updates to the game to make it more stable. One of their most well-known updates was to make it stable by removing NPCs in towns and villages, because having the NPCs in towns and villages ends up causing the RAM in the Switch to fill too quickly. And to remedy that, this was really a thing before any of the updates, where you could play for an hour or two, and then you had to save your game, stop playing, turn off the Switch, turn it back on, start the game back up, and that way you have fresh RAM, clean RAM to be able to run the game. And the glitches and stuff, it's not like the series hadn't had glitches. Jason the 13th, of course, knows the missing number glitch in Red and Blue, but
I love that one.
It was nothing as bad as how Pokemon Scarlet and Violet had. And what is my thought process is, what is the motivation for Nintendo Game Freak Pokemon to iterate a better game when this sold 22 million units and it hasn't even been a year yet? Because it was a year, I think, in September or October. Like, where's their thought process? Do they have any sort of motivation to want to update that, release games with less errors? Astrimedes, I'm deferring to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, so as you mentioned, bugs and stuff, like things like pop in, like you're talking about, when you say pop in, I assume you mean like the game behaves perfectly fine in terms of like mechanics and everything, but graphics wise, something like takes too long to show up in the scene, basically, and suddenly appears when it does. So that's like, that's kind of like, that can be like a performance thing. Not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily put that in the category of bugs, but it is, when you have bugs and you have stuff like that, it means you have unstable in some way code base, one way or another, that your game is running on. And I'm actually surprised, I didn't actually know that the Pokemon games, it sounds like in particular, kind of like the later entries in the series, have had that many bugs. Like my experience playing the first game was no bugs, and I did hear you allude to, it sounds like one maybe kind of esoteric bug or something in the first game. But yeah, I mean, like in general, that happens when either like the development schedules are way too tight, your developers suck, the organizational structure of the company sucks in a way that prevents things from getting done well. Like those things all, or some combination of those things, is usually, why you get a bad code base. It's how you can have a great set of developers, like put them on an insane timetable and or with an insane kind of like management structure, and they will make a buggy mess.
And to go to with what you're saying, Nintendo has pretty much mandated Game Freak and Pokemon Company to make these games and make them at least one a year. If they're not making the main iteration, then they make the spin-off, which again, Jason the 13th has stated clearly, Arceus, the Legend series, will no longer be spin-offs. They're going to be considered main games.
Yep.
And that's something that Nintendo is doing, where they're saying like, okay, we want these main games released every year. And this year in 2023 is one of the first years that they're not doing that. Instead, Nintendo's like, okay, instead of doing a main game, just do DLC. And
okay, real quick. So the generation games come out roughly every 3 years. And in between that is where you get all the filler games and their remake games, like
Yes.
the Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and all the extra ones. So Arceus fell in the line of those, which is why originally I didn't think of it as a main game, but it is now canon in the main generation games without it being its own generation. So Sword and Shield was the first Pokemon game that did DLC. So instead of having a like sequel one where like red and blue got yellow, Diamond and Pearl got I'm gonna say the wrong one. Which one?
Not Crystal.
Opal.
No, because Crystal was a, oh my god, I can't think of it now. But like Platinum is a add-on game. Black and White 2 are add-ons. Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon were add-on games. So instead of doing an add-on game for Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet, we're getting DLCs as our add-ons. So this will only be the second time Pokemon's doing DLCs.
And I feel like that's a lot friendlier to the developers overall. Like it's something that's going to be better and less time intensive, and more importantly for the company, save money, because that's the big thing. If they can save money in development and still crank out the dollars, then that makes all three of the partners between Nintendo, Pokemon Company, and Game Freak happy. One of the
real quick.
Simbu,
I want to caveat the sales numbers real quick. Only because red and blue, 2 games, same thing. You needed both copies to catch them all. Same with Sword and Shield, silver and gold, diamond, platinum, whatever, sun, moon. So it may be a 22 million in sales for Scarlet and Violet, but again, the question begs, how many people are like Jason the 13th and bought a copy of each?
Yeah, but that's still sales on both versions.
Yep. Yeah, it's still selling the.
Because I didn't pay for one and got both. I had to pay for both.
and
right,
and
but
Simbu,
that's what I'm kind of asking.
Are you saying
No.
that encourages the sales numbers sort of thing? Like
Yeah,
it's its own pressure to buy more?
It kind of skews.
in
It
those
might skew it a bit.
generations or whatever. Yeah.
But
because
that's part of Nintendo's marketing strategy. And
Yeah.
Simbu, you hit the nail on the head. That because lovers of the series will want to buy both, or as Jason had said in his scenario where he wants to play his own copy of Pokemon, maybe he's going to play the blue while his brother plays the red, and so the family's going to buy both the red and the blue, and then it becomes a thing where, well, I want my own red, I want my own blue, and then they end up buying 2 copies of both red and blue, one for each of the brothers.
Now-
Cha-ching.
Right.
Inferno
So the family
Fox.
of 3, there you go. There's 6 copies
Yes.
of red and blue that were just
Very
bought.
well, possibly.
Absolutely, that is absolutely
Now-
an excellent point.
They don't lump them together, right? Like if you look up Scarlet, it has its own. Does it have its own
Sales
revenue through Scarlet compared to Violet, or
They lump 'em.
they're lumped together?
Yep, same thing with Sword and
See,
Shield.
that's where they can pad it. That's where I would
See,
say
right.
they pad it.
So again, my question is,
Okay.
stands is that if there wasn't 2 separate games, if it was Pokemon Sun and Moon and it was all one game, would I'm sure you're still going to be somewhere in the probably 15, 16, 17 million copies sold, but there's at least 4 to 5 million copies, I'm assuming, that wouldn't get bought because people don't have to buy both games to catch them all anymore.
And your range was exactly on the mark, because Pokemon Arceus, its own single game sold 15 million. You literally just said 15, 16, 17. You were right on the money. You were right on the money.
Wow.
Because
that was just off the top of my head.
and that's the point. Like, it's been this released January 2022. And it like a little over a year and a half, and 15 million. It's to me, it's kind of crazy. And I think they're call me crazy, but I think Scarlet and Violet are separate games in name only, because it's the same game.
Yes.
You just have different ability of Pokemon that you catch in different ratios. And in this entry, you start with a different legendary. You start with this cute little retarded guy who's got built-in wheels and doesn't use them. And then the Violet has got the cool looking robot guy that has the wheels and actually uses them. So
now, every generation Pokemon that's red, blue, gold, silver, all of them, it's exactly what you said, other than the new ones having the different legendaries. Because Sword and Shield did the same thing with the dogs. You got one or the other. But every one is the exact same game story-wise and everything. Just they have a few different Pokemon in them, and of course the legendaries are different.
And which again encourages the social aspect of linking and trading, which came back all the way to the original Red and Blue on the Game Boys.
Because how cool was that? Was it to be? I almost got into Pokemon Red and Blue when I was reading my old Nintendo Power, and I was reading up on this series where, oh, you could connect two Game Boys together, and I could, if I bought the red, I could connect with somebody's blue and get all the Pokemon that I would have the hardest time of getting. Like, that sounded cool to me. And just way back when, them coming up with that idea, and of course now you don't even have to worry about that. You just connect
to the internet. Before on the Game Boy days, that was that was always fun, because Jason the 13th, you'll remember the little connector hub where one plugged into one, and then the box came off of it, and then the three other people would plug in with their own cords.
Yeah.
Game Boy loved its peripherals. There's so many weird first party and third party peripherals.
Oh my
God. Folding down magnifying.
I remember the weird magnifying glasses.
I have that.
Yeah. Game Boy light.
The book light for the Game Boy.
The light.
For the game, the old book lights. I mean, we could probably do a whole episode on just the Game Boy and all its iterations.
We will.
Yeah,
we will. That will be a topic. We're going to be talking about the Game Boy at some point, because oh man. So one of the things that I just saw, I saw it on YouTube. This little hand puppet Arlo had a whole thing about Pokemon, and one of the suggestions that he had to help fill in the years, maybe the development cycle needs 4 years versus just the standard 3. That would help. But like a filler game, you got all the remakes and everything like that. But what about a new game or a remake that's pixelated, like literally going back to the roots of pixelated sort of graphics, or even failing that, if you want to make it a better like upscale effect, doing like HD 2D, like the Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy and everything like that, but with Pokemon, because Team Asano does those Octopath Traveler games on super low shoestring budgets, but they consider those games a success when they sell 1 million copies of that. If you put the Pokemon game, but it's it's a full-fledged RPG, but it's in
they price that game shockingly high too, those isn't that game like still sell for $50-$60, which is actually surprising for like an indie teen PC RPG, whatever.
You can I think it still is, but you can get them on sale.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying when you bring up the sales, my first thought is like, it's interesting. So even though they only need to do 1 million, they're actually priced pretty high for like an indie studio.
And they go on sale, but like you attach a Pokemon name and the Nintendo name on top of that, because Nintendo is notorious for not doing sales, not reducing the price permanently, because If you go to like Target, Best Buy, Walmart right now and find Breath of the Wild, $60. And
oh yeah, like it could, compared to like a Nintendo, like a AAA, like their pricing is like at least equivalent.
So-
I was just kind of remarking that it's interesting that it allows us to probably make a better comparison, because like in terms of like game copies sold, it's probably fairly similar.
and something like if Pokemon does that and it's got the Pokemon name and everything like that, imagine how instead of like, oh yay, we reached 1 million, Nintendo would probably be pissed that it only reached 10 million. But 10 million on that shoestring budget would be so much better.
They gotta feed the Nintendo machine versus
Yeah.
however many people make those Octopath Traveler games.
Jason, what's your thought on that? Would you like another pixelated Pokemon game?
Actually, I would have no problems with that. If they do it as like the RPG and not one of these weird side games, like I played that Pokemon like Quest pixelated like blocky one that was free on the Switch way before the Unite one. It held my attention for a little while, but not long enough. So if they did it as like an RPG style, like something like that, it would hold my attention a lot longer.
Yeah, so it really makes me wonder if that'd be something that they can do, because hey, it'd be another Pokemon game, and it'd be cool to see a lot of the Pokemon in that whole old traditional pixelated style.
Yeah.
And speaking of Pokemon, there of course are now over 1,000 plus Pokemon in the overall Pokedex.
And it's no longer possible to catch them all in one place.
So that kind of begs the question: what about an entry that could have all of the Pokemon and then some in one entry? Because they did that with Smash Brothers. They have all of the characters and nearly all the stages in one Smash Brothers game. What would stop Nintendo from having all the Pokemon in a new Pokemon game? Jason, what do you think?
I think so if Scarlet and Violet were going to, of course they came out, they had like just over 400 Pokemon in the first decks. I know they're adding more with the DLC, but now if any new game that came out, if they kept it to 400 to 500 Pokemon and left it at that, and as you complete it, and then a year later when they're putting out the DLC, I don't see a reason why they couldn't give all the rest of them in the DLC, because of the fact that your hardcore fans want it, and it gives you something to achieve, like one of all your little trophies. Like you got to fill up the decks and get it all, because once you complete the first part, you've already get the shiny charm and everything for completing like the main game. That secondary Pokédex doesn't influence anything in the game, so it's literally just completing and being, hey, I was able to collect them all. So I could see him adding it to a DLC.
Well, I wanna bring this up. Now, you say there's 400 to 500 in Scarlet Violet, right?
Yep.
Okay. Now, what do you think the encounter rates for each Pokemon are, given each area? Now you're going to go ahead and add another 500 to 600, 700 Pokemon to that.
Yep.
I don't see it happening any
Scarlet
good way.
and Violet, it has 400 and something right now. The DLC is bringing it up to 800. That's only 200 less than the grand total at the moment.
Okay, so that's fine. That brings it up to 800. But then you're talking about bringing in all the originals.
Yeah,
that's another 500, 600, 700. Now you're up to close to 2,000 Pokemon. Again, your encounter rates are going to become a problem.
It is still potentially a solvable problem if you had a very big world and you broke up geographically where you could get each batch. Yeah. But like my first cynical thought when we asked the question, why not put all the Pokemon in one game, is that they are keeping that in their back pocket for if Pokemon interest seems to wane or something, and then they can do a big bang. Everyone come back and love Pokemon again. Look, all the Pokemon in one place for the first time, kind of thing.
I could see that.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that.
We're having a little bit of audio
Yep,
difficulty.
Simbu, your
Yeah,
audio
sorry.
is chopping out there.
Sorry, Simbu, it looked like you were cutting out.
We had no audio now.
Uh-oh.
Well, he'll work on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
bless.
Yeah, he'll work out that. And while Simbu dropped out, he can jump back in. The feed is not locked. So he can get back in.
Cool. Real
One
quick,
question. Oh,
Can I
yeah.
let me interrupt? I know Simbu's not here to hear this, but one way they could do it without adding all the extra encounters that Simbu was saying is they have access to Pokemon Home now, which is the new version of Pokemon Bank, that instead of letting you go and catch them, you could import any Pokemon you wanted from Pokemon Home. That way you could already have it from one of the other games, and even though it's not in that game, just be able to bring it in and do it that way.
And most importantly, that encourages further gameplay in other Pokemon vehicles and selling other Pokemon games, which kind of that's an excellent point and helps to segue that as of May 2022, Pokemon overall, the franchise is the second highest selling video game series of all time. Second highest. Number one is Tetris, with Pokemon selling 480 million copies and Tetris at 496.4 million. Again, this was May of 2022, where this is pretty much before this little guy right here and his other wonderful counterpart, Simbu. Welcome back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's
No,
okay.
no worries.
Hey,
It
we can hear
happens.
you now.
So we're just kind of moving on to overall kind of sales in regards to Pokemon. I kind of want to segue this to the gameplay style of the mainline series, because I've heard it in video game social media circles that turn-based RPGs, turn-based gameplay, menu-based RPGs are dead, even though the main part of the battles for the mainline series use turn-based RPG mechanics. So Astrimedes, from a developer's perspective, is this, and this might be more like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you see the turn-based style of gameplay being indicative to the series' overall success, or was the success indicative to the turn-based series being continuing to work? What are your thoughts on that?
I think as I was saying before about the design being fairly simple, I think turn-based is like a good fit for a simple design like that. But I think for Pokemon, it's actually incidental what the combat is, as long as it kind of like walks that line where it's simple to play for kind of kids and beginners, but deep enough for kind of like diehard people and seasoned video game RPG players to get really into. And I would definitely say overall, just to, as someone who almost exclusively now these days plays turn-based games, it's definitely not like dead as a thing. It's one of those things that I think like there's swings sometimes in like, you know, what like many games are doing. And I think sometimes you see a big batch of turn-based stuff and it causes people to say, oh, turn-based is dead. And it's basically when people jump on and start making games, you know, that are like that anyway. That's I love turn-based games, and I take offense. Is what I'm saying. But
it's funny because of course you had Final Fantasy 16 that came out that was 100% action, and you hear in the whole
and Persona. People love Persona.
Turn-based being, and then you have Baldur's Gate 3, which came out like a week or two ago, and is like has the most concurrent players on Steam, at least until Starfield releases in a couple days. So the idea, I'm with you, Astrimedes. The idea that turn-based could be dead. Shoot, Persona. That's another excellent vehicle for that.
But
Yeah,
in terms of topic, like I think it's actually incidental, and I think you can maybe see that in the success of some of the side games that don't even do Pokemon combat, and like what is even happening in Pokemon Go. As someone who's only seen like vaguely what the screen looks like, it's like
I know
my point being, it's simple but like deep enough to be interesting still somehow is all that actually matters to the design of like the central gameplay mechanic in these games.
Yeah, Jason, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I know it's a more of a niche series, but my Disgaea that I love so much, they're coming out with Disgaea 7, which is technically the 8th one in the game series. It plays like Inferno Fox will know this one real well, like Final Fantasy Tactics. Kind of like a chessboard. It's still all turn-based, and it's still going strong technically, even though I know it doesn't have the following as Final Fantasy or Pokemon or anything like that.
I've never played Disgaea, but I definitely have been aware of it. Yeah,
more like a Fire Emblem, and the Fire Emblem games are still going, pretty strong. And their strongest entry was Fire Emblem Three Houses, which was an amalgamation between a Persona 5 type loop and the tactical RPG. I'm going to apologize to Storm because I had a question for her, but I kind of got sidetracked. Storm, what would it take you to get into? How can I sell you a vehicle of Pokemon? What would it take to get you into a console entry for Pokemon?
If there was something, I don't know, entry level basic, I'd try it. I'd give it a whirl just to give it a whirl. I have nothing against it. I've just not picked it up. I mean, it did take me a little bit to get into Pokemon Go, but yeah, if it was easy that I could pick up like one of the ones that just came out, the Violet or whatever, and just get into it and play, because I know they're years old. So,
the nice thing
possibly could get into it.
All of the Pokemon are freestanding. You don't have you didn't have to play since Red and Blue to be able to get into the series. It's
right.
Heck, it's not even numbered like Final Fantasy. And the Final Fantasies, one doesn't relate to 7, doesn't relate to 6, doesn't relate to 13. Pokemon isn't even like that.
Yep. Every generation is completely different.
Yep. So
that's good.
I cannot recommend this game, Scarlet and Violet. I can't do it because I'm a nut and I like my game that runs smoothly and everything like that. Pokemon Legends Arceus, whatever you want to call it.
Archie Bunker.
Exactly. Archie Bunker is really
Pokemon Archie and Jughead.
Exactly. Pokemon Legends Riverdale is really would probably be a good starting spot. If they ever do any of the put Red and Blue on the NSO or NSO expansion pack, that would be good, but they're not going to do that because that would be throwing money away, and Nintendo won't throw money away because Nintendo is the Disney of video games. They're not going to do it.
Well, I would say Storm's perfect vehicle would be Pokemon Crossing. And it would be a merger of Pokemon and Animal Crossing.
Yeah, if
Pokemon cozy game. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
I could actually see that game working really well.
Yeah. Oh my God.
If it comes out, you heard it here first.
Because they've crossed Pokemon with Tekken, and it's called Pokken. They've crossed Pokemon with Dynasty Warriors. I think that's Pokemon Warriors. I think they crossed Pokemon with Kirby and Kirby. No, they didn't do that last one, but they're throwing everything at the wall.
Pokken tournament.
It sticks. Yeah, and Pokemon Stadium. Really, there's a lot of different things. It's a nice open series, and it's thanks to Jason the 13th that helped to kind of help keep an open mind with the series, which is what got me into this and why I'm so angry with this game, because this game really matches my face really well when I was playing it and hearing about it and talking about it. So one of the last sort of subjects we touched upon, kind of how there's so many different types of Pokemon, where You got grass Pokemon that are weak to fire attacks, water Pokemon that are weak to electric attacks. I grew up with Final Fantasy games, so that sort of elemental thing really resonates with me, where especially with fire, ice, and lightning, where fire is weak to ice, ice weak to fire, where there are 8 elements by the time of Final Fantasy VI coming out. Jason, with so many elements, how do you keep them straight? My God.
I don't know anymore. It just comes with playing all the games. And there are still times that you stop and you're going, what is that weak to again? Or what is that strong against again? You know, like you second guess yourself still. And yet there are the fans that still want more types. They want to see a new type added to the game.
Because, like, what is it? Normal and ground, and there's a number of them that are like so similar.
Oh yeah, especially ground and rock. They are
That's it.
Two
Ground and
most
rock.
similar types that they all should both just be one typing.
Yeah.
Well, but Diglett's not rock. He's ground. So
They should have called it like dirt and rock. It's still a stupid distinction, but it's more different.
I think the distinction is just the way they designed the Pokemon. The rock
100%.
ones literally are like
Yeah.
rock.
So where would we'd like to see the series go from here? What's the next game gonna be? Simbu, what's the next Pokemon gonna look like?
honestly, I mean, if you're talking mainline game, it's going to be something similar to what we've always seen with red, blue, green, yellow, pink, purple, gold, rainbow, whatever. That's what it's going to be. Honestly, I really have to say that even though just joking with Storm, I really think that their next foray into a offshoot should be a Animal Crossing like collaboration kind of game. I think that with the current Animal Crossing in its state that it is, I think that this would be a perfect time to not only give you a brand new Pokemon game, but also give you that brand new Animal Crossing game, bringing people across the battle lines.
That would be, with how cozy games are blowing up right now, that's a make money scenario. That is a make money scenario. Storm, do you agree? Is that what you would like to see for a next Pokemon game?
I could see them doing something with Animal Crossing, because they had the items for Mario during Mario's anniversary. There were certain items you could get in the game. You can get outfits. The biggest thing that they gave us was pipes in Animal Crossing, so you can place the pipes and travel around your islands. That is fun to use. So I can see them doing little stuff like that, and it'd be cool if they introduced special villagers like they did a la Sanrio. I think that would be more of a crossover thing they could do for a new Animal Crossing coming up on a new Switch. So as far as any game goes, I don't know. Maybe update Pokemon Go, so if I am in a mega raid and I don't win that mega raid, make it count that I still battled and won. Yeah, buttheads, but that's about it.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm sarcastically saying hurrah for the pipes, because I would, for your sake, Storm, I want more and better updates for Animal Crossing. But
hey, if they gave us
as
good
we elaborated
updates, I
on our
might play
Animal
more.
Crossing cast here, Astrimedes, how about you? Again, kind of generally going into like where you see the Pokemon series going for the next game. You pretty much see what Simbu was saying about how it's going to be just like the next iteration, or what do you think?
I think they have a formula. It works until something makes them have to deviate like from that, like a drop in sales or something. They're probably not going to change anything about the mainline formula. I would agree though that like the cozy game idea could completely work. And I actually had the same thought as you asked Storm, what kind of game with the Pokemon game could you get into? I had the same thought. And then also immediately thought like that could work, and almost like, why haven't they done that yet? But another kind of a type of Pokemon game I would like to see would be, I think they could do something kind of, you mentioned pixel graphics. It just makes me think, what if they released a mobile devices only Pokemon game that was pixel graphics, that was like a demaked version of a more modern Pokemon game, or like a mix of mechanics and stuff from a more modern Pokemon game, and kind of intentionally design it a little more bite-sized and to just feel like a mobile game, but still have a lot of that like complexity there, feel like an old RPG.
Kind of like Jason the 13th. That kind of makes me think of Final Fantasy Record Keeper.
Yeah.
The one mobile game where it's a demake of all of the Final Fantasy.
Yes, actually,
Yep,
I
yep.
remember seeing something about that game. It does seem very, what I described is very similar to that, actually.
And
Yeah.
I
It'd be
spent way
pretty
too
cool.
much time and way too much money on that. So
Oh, you're its target audience. Wow. Yeah.
yeah. Being the Final Fantasy nerd, I absolutely am.
Well, and that would be what a Pokemon cozy game would be.
Yeah.
You know, look at like Disney's Dreamlight Valley that is
Yes.
currently in the beta. It's a cozy game. You can buy the founders packs, but the game will end up going free to play with in-game microtransactions to, you know, like if Pokemon did a cozy free to play game like that and, you know, microtransactioned it, so be it. That's not a bad idea.
But you mean Pokemon Go's not a cozy game?
No,
Not when you're walking
You gotta
around.
get up and walk. What's the matter with you?
The better question is, you mean Pokemon Sleep isn't a cozy
Oh,
game? You're
gee,
literally
I haven't
in
even
bed.
touched that.
You're in
What a
bed
game.
getting.
Oh, get
Haven't even
out of here.
touched that.
Go away. Where's my chancla?
Jason, I saved you for last because you got this is your guy, your baby here. Where do you see the Pokemon series going? Where do you see it? Where would you like to see it?
You know, that's a good question as to where I'd like to see it go. I think they've been on the up and up with how they did the games. If you look at Sword and Shield, that was like their first time testing open world stuff, and then they came out with Arceus, and I thought Arceus was great, even though you had to travel to separate worlds, but you still had, well, separate worlds, separate lands, I guess, or areas, and even though they weren't connected, you could see the progression that Pokemon has been doing with it, because now Sword and Shield, sorry, Scarlet and Violet, it is all open world and you can pretty much explore everything. Now, they still try to put certain things behind like the blockers, the walls, you know, like you have to get X amount of badges. Now, the one thing, and I know the YouTubers were talking about it a lot, and I would love to see it. So you have your 8 gyms, and instead of going around in Scarlet and Violet, you can battle them out of order, but their levels stay the same. So you could end up being level 50 and go back to the first gym, and they still only have those 3 Pokemon at level like 15. What they need to do is implement a level system on the gyms to where no matter what one you go to first,
just scale it. This is a solved problem.
To your level, and that way it doesn't matter what area you go to, every gym will fall in line with your character.
And as Astrimedes is saying, I totally agree. It's a soft problem. A scalable option even can be there. One of the biggest problems with Pokemon that I've heard is the lack of difficulty settings, where there are so many hacks and everything out there right now for older Pokemons, where like you can make it artificially more difficult, and it actually adds a lot of fun challenge to it. So newer Pokemon games should be able to leverage that, like honestly any AA or AAA video game to have a difficulty setting built within an additional options, and maybe even have like a softer set of options where it's child and parent, and you leave it on child, it's like 2 settings where it's difficulty and maybe scale, and then you switch it to parent or adult, and then that too becomes like, I don't know, 5 or 10, where it's overall difficulty, spawn a number of monsters, Pokemon that spawn, the scaling, how much you scale, how much experience you get, and just like have that ability to where you're these are family games, and so it allows us and then both kids to play it, but cater to both sets of individuals, both the adults and the children, with the extra set of options. But that
unfortunately, I think Nintendo still is on that. They won't let go of the fact that they want to sell to all the younger generations, so they keep it easy, and they forget that a lot of their fans have grown up with the game and don't want the easy games anymore. They want an adult version, basically, and they still haven't given us the difficult settings, which is why people make their own Nuzlocks and everything online.
Yep, Nuzlocke.
Yeah, I mean, like
the
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Nuzlocke being the emulated versions of the games that are tougher, that are more difficult.
Yep. It's
Sorry,
self-imposed
Astrimedes,
rules
Yeah.
and when you're playing through the game.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember what I was going to comment, actually.
Sorry,
the
we threw you off
Nuzlocke.
track.
I'd seen reference to Nuzlocke and vaguely what it was. And yeah, I think the interesting term there just distracted me.
But yeah,
I can feel my level 5 grandpa crown shifting to other people.
yeah. See, now you're the fuzz in level 5 grandpa is now being handed over to Astrimedes here. But overall, great discussion, and this isn't going to be the last that we hear on the overall Pokemon subject, and we're going to touch upon other video game topics, because we love video games and we love the idea of being able to talk and to speak to them. But Pokemon is a living, breathing franchise. It's something that we'll talk about and touch upon again. If not within the podcast, then it'll be something where maybe Jason the 13th and I will do a separate discussion and video for on another time. But we'll go and work to wrap stuff up here. I just want to take the time to thank both our fans and audience for joining and listening in on us, and most importantly, most especially thanking my cast and crew here. Just want to go ahead and shout out and just point out to them, Simbu Darkfang. Of course, you can find him at Basement of the Dead in Aurora, Illinois. That again is Basement of the Dead. If you are in the Chicagoland area, I definitely recommend checking them out. If you want to have a haunted, scary experience, their opening night is on September 22nd. So Simbu, thank you again for joining us.
It's always a great time hanging out with you creeps.
Absolutely. And we're creeping on here. And speaking of creeps, Astrimedes, thank you again for joining us. You can, of course, find him at Second Place Games. He is a developer and co-owner. Astrimedes, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It was a great discussion on something I didn't know I had a lot to say about until I did.
And next, of course, we have Stormrosesky. Storm has her Twitch and YouTube channels of Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I appreciated just having to be quiet this week and listen a little bit. But you know, I don't mind speaking, but I didn't have a whole lot to say, except my favorite Pokemon might be Eevee. I think that's how you say
favorite
name.
Pokemon. Good point. Simbu, what's your favorite Pokemon?
Oh God.
You're welcome.
Mimikyu.
Ooh.
Astrimedes, you got a favorite Pokemon?
Snorlax. So I'm very sleepy.
And Jason the 13th, yours is Gengar. Who else?
Yes, it is.
Any other favorite?
Any others? Oh, there's a few of
Squirtle.
Yeah, Turtwig is my favorite starter.
Yes. And Jason the 13th, you can, of course, find on his YouTube channel of Jason the 13th 4 Pokemon gameplay videos. Not only Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but also some Arceus, as well as Tears of the
Riverdale.
Kingdom and yep, Fingerdale and Forklift. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Not a problem. If you
And
like
again-
shiny hunting, check me out too.
Yes, for the shinies where there's the 0.0001% chance to encounter and catch a shiny. And of course, I am of course Inferno Fox. You can catch the newest video on the Inferno Fox Gaming YouTube channel about my overall experience reviewing 10 Sega Genesis games as a nerdy Nintendo fanboy. Again, thank you everybody for joining us, and hope you all have a great day.